There lived a very rich man, Philip. He lived with his wife Precious and his daughter Diana. They lived in a very beautiful house. This rich man was the youngest of two brothers. He was a professional lawyer and spent most of his days in his executive chamber where he attended to clients. One day he had a visit from a client who came to report about having been assaulted in a media shop and wanted to sue the company for assault. The rich man listened intently to his client's account, taking detailed notes on the incident at the media shop. The client explained how she had been verbally assaulted by an employee and felt humiliated. She wanted to seek justice for the wrong done to her and ensure that the company was held accountable for the behavior of its staff. Philip, as a professional lawyer, carefully walked her through the legal process, explaining the various steps involved in filing a lawsuit. He explained that they would need to gather evidence, such as any recordings, witnesses, or documentation that could support her claims of assault. Additionally, he outlined the potential outcomes of the case and discussed the compensation she could be entitled to if they were successful in court. Justice must be served, he assured her, and I will do everything in my power to ensure that you're not only heard but compensated fairly for the wrongs done to you. The client, although initially anxious, began to feel reassured by Philip's calm demeanor and thorough understanding of the legal intricacies involved. She was grateful for his guidance and trusted that he would represent her interests with diligence and care. As the meeting concluded, the lawyer promised to begin working on the case immediately and to keep her updated on every development. As she left his office, he reflected on the gravity of the case, his mind already turning toward the best legal strategy to ensure justice would prevail for his client. Having had a long day, he arrived home exhausted from work. He was greeted by his beautiful wife and daughter. Later that evening, as he sat in his mansion with his wife and daughter, he couldn't help but think about how his work, although often demanding, was a powerful tool for change and justice in society. Despite the luxury of his life, he knew that his true fulfillment came from using his skills to help others in their time of need. Caleb's the rich man's elder brother had a life stark contrast to that of his younger brother. While Philip lived comfortably in his mansion, Caleb struggled daily to make ends meet. His family's home was small, run down, and located in the heart of the slums. It was a place where people lived in constant hardship, surrounded by poverty, yet Caleb clung to hope that things might improve someday. Each morning, Caleb would leave the house before sunrise, walking through narrow, dirt-covered streets, his clothes worn and faded. His work as a day laborer was never guaranteed. He would visit different farms, seeking out those willing to hire him for the day to work on their land. For every opportunity, Caleb worked tirelessly under the hot sun, tilling the earth, planting seeds, and doing whatever physical labor he could to earn a few coins. He had a loving wife, Miriam, who did her best to support the family by taking on small jobs like washing clothes for neighbors or cooking meals for others in exchange for a little money. Their son, Samuel, attended the local school, a modest building with few resources, where he was often teased by wealthier children. Despite the teasing, Samuel was bright and determined, always excelling in his studies. Miriam and Caleb tried to support him in any way they could, knowing that education might be his ticket out of the slum. Every night, Caleb would return home exhausted, with only a small amount of money to show for the hard day's work. He could barely afford enough food for the family and was often forced to choose between buying medicine for his sick wife or paying for Samuel's school fees. He rarely had enough money to invest in the future, and the burden of constantly living in survival mode weighed heavily on him. Though Caleb's circumstances were harsh, he held on to a quiet sense of pride. He loved his family deeply and did whatever he could to make sure they felt cared for. But the gap between him and his brother was hard to ignore. Every time Caleb saw his brother's luxurious life, it stirred a mix of feelings, admiration, and occasional pound of bitterness. He had tried asking his brother for help in the past, but refused to lend him a helping hand. Despite the struggles, Caleb never gave up. He would talk to his wife late at night, expressing his hopes for a better life for Samoa and promising that things would get better, even though it sometimes felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on him. One day, as Caleb walked in the field of a wealthy landowner, the thought occurred to him, perhaps, just perhaps, he could reach out to his brother again for help, but Caleb wondered why his brother, with all his resources and connections, couldn't offer some help to lift him and his family out of their struggles. One day Caleb felt very ill and his condition worsened over the course of several days, and it became clear to his wife, Miriam, that he needed medical attention. He had developed a fever, his body weak from exhaustion and years of toil. Miriam watched helplessly as her husband's health continued to deteriorate, and the stress of not being able to afford the proper care only deepened her despair. In a panic, Miriam rushed to the local clinic, hoping for some kind of treatment, but the clinic staff demanded upfront payment, which she could not provide. In tears, she realized there was only one place left to go, Philip's house. She had been hesitant to ask him for help before, knowing how often Caleb's brother had turned him away. But this time, the urgency of the situation was undeniable. She thought, perhaps, this would be the moment when Philip would help, especially considering the family ties. She prayed that he would find it in his heart to offer some relief. Miriam arrived at Philip's mansion, her heart racing. She knocked on the grand doors, and after a brief moment, one of the servants opened them. She was led into the expansive home, feeling out of place in such luxurious surroundings. She waited anxiously in a sitting room as Philip arrived, his expression cold and indifferent as always.